Today I'm going to talk about the things that you need to get that basically are the essentials, and I'll probably add just a few things that that you might want to expand on later, get later, and help out. But let's get down to it. The first thing you need to get, obviously, is a hunting license. You'll probably have to take a hunter's education course. Most states, I think they require that. Arkansas does. And once you get all that, you're going to need to figure out what kind of deer hunting you want to get into. Do you want to bow hunt, gun hunt, muzzleload? And with bow hunting, you can either get a traditional compound bow or crossbow. And I prefer a compound bow. I do hunt with a crossbow every once in a while. You can also get you a muzzleloader, which is what they call primitive weapons in some states. It's a single shot. You got to add powder through the barrel, and then add the bullet in over on top of that, and then a primer on the backside. And it's basically one shot. That's all you get. And you got to reload. And then you got your rifles. And there's a lot of different calibers out there. There's a lot of good calibers out there. Depending on what kind of deer hunting you're going to be doing, the terrain, it's going to kind of dictate what you want to get as far as rifles. So if you're hunting an area that's really brushy and there's not big open shots 100, 200 yards out, but you're hunting an area where you get 30, 40, 50 yard shots that have a lot of brush, I prefer something like a 30-30. They're a really good gun for brush. They call them brush guns. They're a really good caliber for brush shooting. I've taken a lot of deer with a 30-30 through a lot of brush. And here lately, the last several years, I've been hunting areas that have shots where I can take 100-yard shots and sometimes more. And for that, I prefer a 270, but you still got a lot of good calibers, like a 30-06, a 308. They're all really good calibers, but it all comes down to personal preference, I guess. And mine is a 270. It's a good shooting, 100 plus yards out. And I've taken a lot of deer with my 270. So you need to think about what kind of area you're going to be hunting and decide what caliber gun you want to get. Once you get your caliber figured out, get a gun, you can buy one at Walmart, pawn shops or gun shop, and you need to take it and decide if you want to shoot open sights or if you want to put a scope on it. You don't need the biggest and the best around, the most expensive things to do this. You can pick up a gun secondhand for just a couple $100, and you can pick up a good scope for $100 or less nowadays. I've got I believe it's a center point on my 270 that I picked up from Walmart. I paid $79 for it, and it is a really good scope, and it'll really draw the light in to where early morning shots are really capable of doing. But once you get a gun figured out, you need to take it out and you need to sight it in and you need to shoot it. And you need to make sure when you shoot it, you're not going off of what they tell you at the gun shop or wherever you bought it from, that they bore sighted it or they put it on paper. I've hunted with people who have gotten a bore-sighted gun or what it's on paper and think that it's good enough to hunt with. It's not. Not by any means, any spec, no way. You need to take it out, you need to put rounds through it and get that thing dialed in. And I'll be going over that in a later video to show you what you need to do and what you need to expect and show you how to accurately sight it in to where you know when you go out there and you shoot, you're going to hit your target. Because the last thing you want to do is wound an animal. You do not want to do that. That is the worst feeling ever. I can promise you that. I've done it. I've made bad shots. And if you're going to deer hunt, you're going to make a bad shot here and there. It just happens. But you want to do everything you can to make sure that when you put one downrange, it lands where you want it. So once you get comfortable with your gun, you get sighted in, you know that you're going to hit your target, you need to think about, okay, clothing. I've taken deer in a pair of blue jeans, work boots, and a camo shirt. You don't need the top of the line, most expensive brands out there that they tell you, oh, you've got to have Under Armour this or that or the other. You don't need all that. Is it nice to have, be fully camo? Oh yeah, it is. It definitely helps, but it's not a necessity. So if you're wanting to save a few bucks, that's a good area you can save a few bucks. Just make sure no browns at all. Do not wear brown in the woods because you look like a deer walking through the woods. You don't want that, I guarantee you. And for gun season, you're going to need orange. You'll have to have a hat and a vest in most places. So you want to make sure you got your orange for gun. And other than that, you got to figure out where you're going to hunt. So I hunt national forest. It's public land. And around here, unless you've got a wad of cash, you're not going to find a whole lot of private property that you can hunt. So I hunt national forest. And when you're hunting national forest, you just got to remember, be respectful of other hunters. If you pull up on a place and there's already a guy there, move on. Go somewhere else. I usually have 3 to 5 spots picked out in my mind to where if I pull up in the morning to go hunting and there's a vehicle there, I've got other places. I do scouting throughout the year. And just before deer season starts, I do a lot of scouting in order to get areas in my mind that I know, okay, there's deer traveling through here, and I've got a good chance of seeing deer. And I do that in more than one spot. I've got trail cameras out that I put out. That's another way to scout, is go to Walmart and pick you up some trail cameras. They have some that are pretty decent cameras for $20 to $50 sometimes. I picked up some at the end of the year one year, about 2 years ago. And I think I paid like $20 a piece for them. And they're great cameras, but they're not top of the line, but they do the job. So use cameras if you can to scout your areas, find the deer trails, the runs, see if you can find their bedding areas, and use that information to figure out where you can hunt, Now, I hunt from a tree stand, and you can get a ladder stand, a climber. They've got what they call lock-on stands that you hang with a ladder that straps to the tree. I've tried all of them. I prefer my Summit tree stand. That's just my preference, you know. And most places that I hunt, they have good trees where you can use a climber. And some places I hunt, you're not going to get a climber in some of the trees, so you got to get a ladder stand or something like that. Like I said, it's all personal preference. It's not necessary. I've hunted from the ground and I've killed deer from the ground. I've walked into places I've never been before, just during deer season, and just picked a spot on the ground, sat down on the ground, and actually had deer walk up and kill them. It can be done. It's not the ideal situation, but it does work sometimes. I prefer to know the lay of the land before I get there, where I'm going to set up, where I'm going to put my stands at, and where I'm going to hunt. And the climber gives me the versatility to where I can move a few trees over. If I know I've seen deer coming through one section, but where I'm at, I can't get a shot, I can move over a couple of trees pretty easily and then set up real easily and quickly to try to get a shot. So that's one thing that you can think about as a tree stand. It's not a necessity though, but you're going to need a weapon, your choice of bow, muzzleloader, or gun. And once you figure out whether you're going to hunt with a bow, muzzleloader, or gun, then you need to figure out where you're going to hunt. And once you get in 2 or 3 or 4 areas that you know you can go there and set up, you should be able to hunt. After that, you need to figure out when you're going to hunt, either morning, afternoon, or evening. Some areas that I hunt are great morning spots, but in the afternoons and the evenings, you'll never see a deer. Some are just the opposite. They're great afternoons or evenings. So you need to utilize a trail camera for that reason. Because I've got trail cameras set out to where you'll get pictures all day long. Some of them you'll get pictures only in the mornings. Some of them only in the evenings. And that's where trail cameras really come into play and are a real big advantage to figuring out where you're going to hunt. Because I've got morning spots and evening spots that I hunt. I'll hunt one area one morning, go to another spot the evening. And that just comes with looking at the trail cameras and keeping an eye on the trail cameras, checking them, and figuring out their activity. And once you get the activity figured out and you decide to hunt that area, if you're going to go in the mornings, I like to get in there a good 45 minutes or so before daylight. That allows me to get set up in the tree, get settled in, and get everything quiet before the sun comes up. And it's a good time to sit there and just reflect on yourself and other things going on and just enjoy nature. To me, that's what it's all about. It's just enjoying myself while I'm out there. I don't hunt big deer. I don't go looking for bucks only. Man, I've killed one big buck in Arkansas, and it's a good one. But I could have done without it. I'm more of a meat hunter. I love the deer meat, the taste. I make summer sausage out of them, and that's just what I hunt for. And I'm just not a horn hunter. I know people that are, that's fine, that's what they want to do, more power to them. I'm just not that way. And it's just, to me, it's a lot of fun to get out there in the woods and just enjoy myself. Another thing that you want to look at is how you're going to get the deer out of the woods. I've got a deer cart that once I get a deer down, I've got a deer cart that I can load it up on, and I can drag it out on 2 wheels. I've also got four-wheelers. Four-wheelers are another good thing that you can have for deer hunting, and it really will take a lot of work out of dragging a deer. If you can get it up on that four-wheeler, you can just drive it out. Or you can use a deer cart like I do in some places, and you can just wheel them out. But dragging a deer, that's a lot of work. So, other than that, there's really not a whole lot that you absolutely need to have in order to go deer hunting. You can work your way up and get different things throughout the year to prepare for the next deer season. Like what I do is with my clothing. I get mine from Walmart. Walmart has decent deals on camouflage pants and camouflage shirts. And at the end of the year, when they start clearancing them out, you can really find some great deals on clothing. Academy, you can also find some good deals on clothing. And it's the more expensive brand stuff, but you can still get a fairly decent deal when they clearance them. At Walmart, I typically pay about $5 a pair for the pants, and about $5 a pair or $5 a shirt. So at the end of the year, I'll usually try and buy 4 or 5 pairs of each. That way I've got them for the next season. And you don't need all that fancy stuff, but it is nice to have the camo. once you do start deer hunting, when you shoot a deer, you want to try to remember exactly where the deer was when you shot it. So you want to pick a point in the woods that, okay, I shot it by this tree with that burnt mark. You know that deer was right there. That way when you get down out of your stand, you can walk to where that deer was standing. Because I'm going to tell you, when you're up in a tree and then you get down on the ground and look around, it looks totally different. So you want to pick a spot on a tree or something nearby that you know, okay, it's going to look, that right there is going to look the same when I get to the ground. I'll be able to recognize that spot on that tree. You also want to watch the deer if it runs off. And remember the last place that you saw that deer. There has been a number of deer that I've shot that have taken off that had I not remembered where the last place I saw it, I might not have found that deer. So you always want to remember where you saw it and shot it, and then where you last saw it as it was taken off if it took off. You do have some that will drop instantly, but a lot of times they will run. So always remember those two spots. You go to the spot you shot it first, and you look for any sign, blood, hair, anything on the ground that shows whether you got a hit or not. And if you're lucky, and hopefully you are, you'll be able to follow a blood trail to the deer. If not, you may have just little drops of blood that you got to follow. And that is a whole other video for itself, I guarantee it. But if you go to the spot you last saw the deer, there's always a good chance that the deer will start bleeding more after it's ran just a little bit. I've had deer that don't bleed a drop for 30 yards, but after that you can follow it with no problem. So there's a lot to deer hunting for the recovery side especially. And it's really fun to get out there in the woods and experience nature. But don't do this thinking that you're going to make up for the grocery store. You know, you're going to save money by going deer hunting, because it's not going to save you money at the grocery store by deer hunting that much. I mean, you may get lucky and you may limit out every year, and that's great. And you'll save some money that way, but you're not always going to limit out every year. And there's been years that I haven't gotten a deer at all, and luckily there hadn't been many of them, but I have had a few years where that happens. But I usually get 2, maybe 3 deer a year on average. And it's enough to keep my freezer in deer meat all year long, because it's just me and my wife. But other than that, I'm not expecting it to make up for going to the store and buying meat, because I know it's not going to happen. You know, and I usually do 30 pounds or 40 pounds of deer meat for my summer sausages. So I go through quite a bit of deer meat for that. But other than that, there's really not much you need. But make sure that you practice with your guns. And if you're using a bow, make sure that you practice with the bow. Try to practice, you know, a couple times a week at least. And I try to do that all year long when I'm bow hunting with a compound bow. And with my crossbow, I'll get it out and I'll shoot it several times during the week for a month or two leading up to deer season, just to get in the practice of, you know, getting it cocked back and everything, trying to be as quiet as I can doing it and shooting it, and making sure that I'm hitting the target where I want, and I practice. And on my bows, with with a bow, you've got a practice tip. You can use the practice tip in order to practice with. But before you go deer hunting, when you buy your broadheads, take one broadhead and use it as your practice broadhead, because a broadhead is almost always going to fly just a little bit differently than a field tip. So you may be hitting right here with a field tip, but your broadhead's hitting here. And if that's the case, you need to adjust it to where your broadhead is hitting where you're aiming. And that's just, it's a fact of life. It's going to happen on almost every broadhead you ever shoot. It's going to be off. They're never going to fly the same as a field tip, because there's nothing for wind resistance on a field tip. So always shoot your broadheads. Just make sure you pick one broadhead and save that broadhead for just that reason. Don't use that broadhead for hunting, but use that one broadhead just to make sure that you don't need to make any fine-tune adjustments with your bow or crossbow. With muzzle loading, the newer muzzle loaders are all what they call inline muzzle loaders, and they use a 209 primer, which is basically a shotgun primer for the most part. The old school muzzle loaders had just a little bitty cap that went on there, and in the rain, you never knew if it was going to fire. You never knew for sure. With a 209 primer, I've never had one foul on me. It's always shot. The old school ones, I've had those foul on me. I pull the trigger, nothing happens. If that ever happens, no matter which one you're using, the old style or the new one, never just pick that gun up and look at it or anything. Always hold it downrange for at least a good minute or two, because you never know if that thing's going to have a delay fire. And it can happen on a muzzleloader. You can pull the trigger, nothing happens but a little pop, and then 30 seconds later, boom, it goes off. I've seen that happen. I've had that happen. So never, ever just pull the trigger, and if nothing happens, just point the gun anywhere. Always keep it pointed in a safe direction when that happens, because you never know if it's going to go off. After, I'd say, a good minute or two, if it hasn't gone off, there's a good chance it's not going to go off. But always make sure. You don't want to hurt anybody or hurt yourself because you got frustrated because it didn't go off. With a rifle, it pretty much doesn't happen. It's, you pull the trigger, it goes boom. So there's not a whole lot of wondering on that over the rifle. I prefer muzzle loading myself. To me, it's a little more challenging because a muzzle loader is really only accurate up to about 100 yards for the most part. You can get a brand new good muzzle loader that'll cost you $600, $700, $800. You can shoot out there 150, 200 yards. Most times you'll hit the target. I just don't like to risk it at anything over 100 with a muzzle loader. I prefer the closer range shots. But hopefully you found this video a little bit informative, and I'm going to have a few more videos coming out for what happens once you finally shoot a deer and tracking the deer, and once you get the deer and load it up. So keep your eyes peeled for that. I'll have them videos out as soon as I can. Have a good one.